So we're going to cover a couple of the really important things, the most important things about capturing Instagrams. First is locations. It's really important to scout a location. It's really important to think about where you want to go to capture an image. Today I brought you here to one of the more iconic Instagrams here in New York City in Dumbo. Perhaps you've seen this images before, but I thought it would be a good place to talk about some of the key things, like lighting. Lighting is probably the most important thing, not just with Instagram, but just in photography in general. Lighting is everything. Well, what does that mean? So one thing is the time of day that you come to capture an image. Typically it's during sunrise, so 90 minutes around sunrise, and then the last 90 minutes before sundown. Basically not at its harshest. You don't ever want to go out and shoot, for instance, in the middle of the day when the sun is directly above, because it's going to be really harsh and it's probably going to create a lot of shadows. That of course can be different if you're in a fog bank or it's a really cloudy day or you're on top of a mountain, but you get what I'm saying. Lighting is really key. All right, well, let's take some photos, okay? So basically when you're at a location and you're gonna take photos, I think my advice to anybody is take more photos than you think you need. Take a ton of photos. You can always go back and select the ones that you want to use. When you're shooting, you want to shoot, I like to shoot horizontal. A lot of people will shoot this way. I prefer to shoot this way because I think it's going to be easier to crop in the end, okay? If you have the iPhone 5S, there's this thing where you can shoot in square. I wouldn't recommend shooting in square at all. I think you're going to lose a lot of resolution if you shoot that way. So I like to shoot in the full, and then you can always crop it later. I think the other thing is to think about composition when you're taking a photo, right? So you've probably heard the rule, you've probably heard of the thing called the rule of thirds, right? So rule of thirds is basically you draw, if you imagine a picture in your head, draw an imaginary lines, breaking it into thirds, and you don't want to put your subject matter right square in the middle. That's just the basics of photo composition. However, I will say that does not necessarily apply to Instagram. Instagram kind of breaks a lot of rules, traditional rules of photography. And it's because Instagram is a square format, so a lot of photos that you post could actually be dead center or might have a perspective that goes right down the middle. It's a great rule, but it's not word of God. You don't have to use it exactly. One of the cool things about the iPhone is it has an exposure locking mechanism, so you can switch around and change the exposure. So if I hold it onto that building, for instance, that becomes now more lit. If I hold it over here on the sky, then I can now, the bridge itself is more clearly defined. So what I like to do with exposure lock is I like to look and find part of the photo that's the softest light. Or in this case, there's a bit of gray in between that bridge. I'm gonna make that my exposure. And then I'm gonna take a photo like that. And basically what that does for me is, I think even though the building becomes a lot darker, when you're editing a photo later, you can always bring up the darks, I think easier than you can to wash away the light, or if it's too overexposed. That's a lot harder for me, at least, to edit that than it is to brighten the dark spots. So that's why I like to do that. Okay, so very important. Another very important thing about lighting is, the light right now is pretty great. It's getting pretty golden. It's glowy. It's awesome. But if I'm going to shoot a subject, I want to make sure it's not backlit, or in this case, Jessica's not backlit. So it's going to be hard for me to see her because she's backlit. So if I maybe move around, or maybe we try some different things with the light. See, right here. Oh yeah, that's much better. Now it's glowy. I can see what she's wearing. I can see her face. Just a better photo.